Hi, I'm Doug Young, here for Acoustic Guitar. We're going to take a look at examples that accompany my article on playing percussively to add a backbeat to your music. And so let's just dive in. I'm going to show you the basic technique, demonstrate the examples, and we'll talk about a few options and things that go beyond what's in the article, I think. So let's start by looking at example 1. So all we do is play a bass note on 1 and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. But in between, on 2 and 4, we're going to take our hand and lift it a little bit off the guitar and come down and hit the strings directly on. So like this. Now, this is going to get a little more complicated as we go on. So let me explain a few basics while we're still doing something really simple. First of all, there's two things going on. One, we're cutting the note off. Instead of playing, the note is much more cut off and staccato. The other thing is we're getting this percussive effect. And we can control how much we want of any of these things. So for example, just looking at example 1, I'm suggesting here that you use your thumb, first and second finger on the 5th, 4th, and 3rd strings. But you could actually don't have to use all 3 strings. You could, in fact, you could use more. You could use 3 fingers, or you could use just your thumb. And you could use varying amounts of force. This could range from simply cutting that note off, but you can still hear a little bit of a percussive effect just from my finger touching a string. But the softer you are, the more it's just controlling the length of the note. All the way to a loud slap, and using more fingers, even louder. And what I'm doing is hitting the strings hard enough to really sort of drive the strings down into the fret and make a snare type sound. So you want to work on that and try to create a sound you like. Now I also mentioned that I usually use a thumb pick. Let me put one on, which of course adds a plastic piece onto your thumb, which even a soft tends to make a noise. And if I really am doing the percussive effect, that plastic hitting the string is much louder. So it's up to you. You have a lot of options in what kind of a tone you can create. Let's go on and look at example 2. Here I'm playing an A minor chord, although I'm only going to be playing strings 5, 4, and 3. And again, here we've got 3 notes going on. And so I want to use thumb, index, and middle to cut those off as well as make the percussive sound. So here's example 2. In example 3, we're going to add a little motion. Instead of just holding a chord down, we're going to start playing a little riff. And this riff is similar, but we're going to have some motion. We're going to play. Which is okay, but listen to what happens when we add the percussive effect to cut the notes off as far as the timing goes and add that snare backbeat. I should mention while we're at it that there's other ways to create this backbeat sound. A lot of modern players are using their palm of their hand to hit the top of the guitar, creating more of a bass drum or a kick drum effect rather than the snare effect. It's your choice of what kind of sound you want to make. You could also do them both. There I'm hitting the strings, but also hitting the top of the guitar with my palm. That's just hitting with the palm of my hand, and I'm not cutting the notes off. And now if I add both, so it's up to you. You can you have a lot of variation to play around with depending on what musical effect you want to create. Let's look at example 4 now. Example 4 is just a little more complicated. And one of the things that's happening is because I'm going to be moving chords between an A minor chord and an E, different strings are ringing. So in addition to the percussion effect, remember we're trying to cut notes off to make them a little more staccato. So in some cases I need to move where my hand fits, and mostly it follows the chord. So in some cases, for example in A minor, I'm going to use thumb, first, second, and third string, and hit 4 strings here. When I'm playing the E chord, I'm going to be playing, and so I need to do the same thing. I need to move my thumb down to the bass string when I make the snare effect. So with that, let's listen to example 4. We're going to look at a slight variation here because so far I've been using this effect both, as we talked about, both to create a percussive effect and to cut the notes off. But what if we don't want the notes to cut off, but we still want the percussive effect? In example 5, what we're going to do is going to play a riff kind of like the one we've been using here. Now, the melody part, I want to have sustain, but I want the bass notes to be more percussive, more staccato, and I want that backbeat in there. So what we're going to do is going to create the backbeat only with our thumb. So for example, see, like, and I'm aiming for the 5th string here because we're playing an A, but I'm really sort of laying my thumb down and hitting both the 5th string and the 6th. So here we still got the top strings ringing. Let's listen to example 5. Now sometimes we've got notes that collide with the point of the backbeat. So we want to have a note and the backbeat at the same time. And there's a couple ways to deal with that. One of them is to, instead of doing the string slap thing, just do a strum. Because we're playing fingerstyle, this sound is very different than if we actually do a downward strum with our hand. So we can create a backbeat that way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And it's not quite the same as this. Again, it's an option, different sound. So let's look at example 6. So if I do that very slowly, let's look at example 7 now. In this case, I'm going to go for a little more subtle. Many of the examples are, very consistent. I'm playing a downbeat on a backbeat on beats 2 and 4 all the time, and trying to make it pretty obvious, usually hitting fairly hard. But example 7 is a different approach. We're only going to put the backbeat, the percussive effect, on beat 2. And it's just a much more subtle thing. It just sort of propels the music. It's not so much a backbeat in the sense of a backbeat on 2 and 4. Let's look at just the first measure of example 7. And again, this could be, I'm only slapping with the thumb, so that my melody note continues to ring out, but the bass note is cut off. And again, this could be anything from a very subtle, just cutting the note off, to a loud slap. Anywhere in between. So here's example 7. Now we could also do this the other way. Here I only put a percussive effect on beat 2, but what if we only put it on beat 4? It creates a whole different feel. Here's example 8, which is very similar to example 7, except that I'm going to put the percussive effect with my thumb on beat 4 only. Different sound, and all depends on what you're trying to achieve. So now let's take a look at a short little piece that I call Back in the Groove, because it's creating a groove with the backbeat. And in this, we're going to use some of the licks we looked at already, and we're going to combine all these techniques. We don't have to just stick to one. Sometimes I'm going to be using my whole hand. Sometimes I'm going to be using just my thumb. Sometimes I'll use the strum. And we use that to try to put a backbeat throughout the tune, but mostly just to keep it moving and feel like it's got a little bit of a groove. Here's Back in the Groove.